It's thinking about it. All right. Well, welcome to the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. I'm Jen Kelly, your host today, and I'm joined by Ian and Paul, and we've got Ken remote in with his answers. So today we're discussing branding for small business. And as a small business owner, you may not think that spending time creating brand identity is necessary, or perhaps you plan to invest in branding efforts once you've grown your business to a certain size. We've got some things to say about that, and today we'll discuss how you can build a brand for your small business, and we're going to bust some of the common myths about branding. We'll also share the essential elements of branding for your business, and we just want you to keep this in mind that your brand is the most valuable asset in your business, and when it's done well, you'll experience measurable benefits and ROI. So with that, let's dive in. Ian, we've got a first question here for you. So, walk us through what is branding and why is it important for small businesses?
Yeah. Hang on one sec. The paper shredder just started automatically by itself.
Nothing like being live. That's okay. That's all right.
Strong. Like branding is so vital to a business because let me start off by saying there's kind of two sides to the branding coin. There's the brand you create as a business, and there's the perception of your brand by the people of this world. And ideally, those go well together, but that's not always the case. So on the side that you can control, you can build a brand. And by that, we're talking about your logo, your name, your design, even your URL, the address that people type in when they go to you online. But branding goes much further than that too. It's really the essence of your business that you can communicate to the world of who you are. It's that perception of your business. Just like when you go out and you meet people as a person, whether you're representing your business or not, people have a perception, and you're also trying to create a perception. You might want to be recognized as relatively intelligent or handsome or beautiful or sporty or fashionable, whatever it is. You in your mind have an idea of what you want to portray and what you want other people to perceive you as. And so with your business, it's the same type of thing. You need to put effort into this. And I don't know if this is the right place to talk about it, but it needs to be part of your strategy, really. And I think Paul's probably going to share more about that. But I think that's really important because your brand is who your business is in the eyes of the world.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of also like the impression that your company leaves on clients, potential clients, past clients, that kind of thing. It's also beyond being the visual, it's the emotional, right? How do people feel, choosing your product, choosing your services, doing work with you? And, that's a huge thing. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes, but there is a huge report that comes out every year about I guess the amount of money that positive branding contributes to a company's bottom line, and that's kind of the elusive thing sometimes. How do you get that positive emotional connection with your brand and your ideal client? So
absolutely, yeah, and just what you said there, like it has to be part of your strategy, or else like how you leave it entirely up to chance and entirely up to whatever that individual experience of that person is, because the experience absolutely is part of it, but the what you portray helps shape that experience to a large degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a meaty topic. This will be great today. Paul, I want to ask you this question: what is the difference between branding and marketing? And if there is a difference, how do the two work together?
Yeah, Ian kind of touched on this, and it dovetails well into his answer. They're two different things, but they do work together. Branding is kind of like Ian said, it's being recognizable. I mean, how often do you recognize a brand by their logo, for instance. You know, and in this online visual world that we live in, even if you're a local business, you want to be find your local business. So if you're a local business in Idaho, you don't need to be recognized in California, but in your community, in the area you serve, you want to be easily recognizable. And that's the branding aspect of it. Whereas marketing is more strategic. It's about, you know, we've talked about marketing and automation and all these things in the past. Marketing is a process of driving revenue, you know, setting your goals and achieving those marketing goals, where branding to me is people recognize who you are, what you do, and like Ian said, their perception of you in the community. That's all part of branding, you know, and your reputation is part of your brand. You know, we talk about reputation management and getting reviews as part of a marketing strategy, but that's also part of your brand. If you have really bad reviews, then you're not going to have people aren't going to have a positive impression of you. So that goes back to branding, but getting positive reviews is also part of a marketing strategy. So I don't know if Ian agrees or disagrees with that, but that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, and can I jump in? Because again, this is where I think the conversation gets really interesting, because there's different camps in the marketing and branding worlds about how these two things coexist together. And having spent a long time corporately and also supporting small businesses, I've absolutely come to the conclusion that branding is not its own thing. Branding lives in your strategic marketing plan and helps feed it, and then runs through everything you do. And you'll hear other people talk about how branding is a separate thing, and you can create your brand by having somebody create the brand without understanding your marketing strategy. That's actually super impossible, and you create a horrible disconnect. So I you know, that's my personal point of view. I'm curious about you guys though, because I think this is where it can get confusing for people, because most people automatically think of branding equals logo, and branding equals a lot more than a logo. It's about brand messaging. It's about how you communicate your value to people. But all of that can't exist without so many other pieces, which I think we're going to dig into as we go through this more.
Absolutely. Let's hear what Ken has to say. The question I have for Ken is, what are some essential elements of branding for a small business?
Hi. So Jen wanted to have me address what are some of the key elements of small business branding. So really, when I think about branding, I think about some really key points, such as clarity of message. Do you quickly and easily come across with what you do as your business, and how you solve a problem for a client? It has to be really clear, has to be fast, and has to be very easy to understand. I love looking at the elements of story to be, on how you create your brand. And so I'm going to draw from StoryBrand, which is, that, and again, this is a paradigm shift that way too many people miss, but it's all about your customer, not you. And so your customer has a problem. They're the hero of the story. They have the problem. They're looking for a guide. You're the guide. And this is a big mistake that most businesses make. They try to make themselves the hero. You shouldn't do that, because a hero is a weaker position. The guide is the person who has been there, done that, has the expertise. So you want to reposition yourself from thinking about yourself as the hero to being the guide. We talked about this last week with JJ from StoryBrand. And so you've got a customer, they've got a problem. They're looking for a guide that can help them solve that problem. that has empathy and authority. So when you're thinking about branding, you need to think about how can you convey that you have empathy and understanding the problem that your customers have, and then also how do you how do you back that up with what kind of expertise and authority do you have? Could be certifications, it could be testimonials from past clients, it could be a variety of things, which leads to to really key points of differentiation. So again, I'm going to start all over. The hero has a problem. They're looking for a guide. That's the business. That's your brand, that calls them to action, because you demonstrate empathy and authority. They're going to rely on you to help them take action to either achieve success or avoid negative outcomes or failures. And so you want to portray all of that. And so when you're thinking about branding, one of the key things that you have to do is you have to understand who your ideal client is. What problems do they have? And how do you help them solve those problems? And so you've got to be able to communicate that very clearly and effectively. And honestly, I think for most small businesses, if you just go through this process, you're going to find that you've done a lot of the hard work of differentiating automatically, because most businesses use their own language, to describe what they do. It's talking about what they do, not the problems that they solve. And so it's like, oh, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. Well, your customer may not realize that what you do is what they need. You've got to use their language and their problem situations to be able to really effectively create differentiation and be clear. And I think, with StoryBrand, what's critical is, you can come up with a really clear, simple message that goes on top of the website in the area we call the hero image. And it's it's a simple, clear statement so that when people are on your website, you got 3 to 5 seconds, they know exactly what you do and that you solve their problem. And then the rest of the page is to incorporate the elements of story to kind of back all of that up. And so, you're going to have, pain, success, kind of as you flow down through that homepage using the key elements of story. And you really want to focus on using what's called a one-liner. That's a simple statement. For example, Changescapes is, we build websites that generate customers. Our full brand script is, most businesses struggle to generate enough leads and sales online. We build websites that generate customers so that our customers can grow and thrive. So you want to paint that element of success, and you want to help people get there. So, just doing that work is going to go a long way to help you with differentiation. But you need to look, differentiation isn't just we provide the best customer service, or blah, blah, blah. I mean, look at every one of your competitors. They're all going to say those same things. You need to be different than that. So, and then, when you think about giving your brand personality, that's where your expertise and authority and empathy come into play. When you lay that out and explain that to people through your story that you create, where you're solving a problem for your customer who's the hero, because you have that expertise and empathy and authority to understand their situation and why they need to have it resolved and how to actually resolve it and guide them through the process. That's where you get real power. And I think that's where you pull in your personality.
That's a great answer. I wanted to do something here to go back to your point, Ian, and see if we could give a bit of an illustration for the audience about how you were saying that if you don't have the strategy part thought through about your company, branding can really go off the rails. And let me give you a little example, and I'm going to be extreme to make the point because we have to do this all with our voice instead of showing pictures. But imagine if we hired a really, really great, we're talking top of the line logo designer, and they came back with something with a very aggressive font and flames, and on its own, the logo looked amazing. But if we are a dog walking company, that might not be the right image that we're trying to project. And without the logo and the visual designer understanding what the business is, what their niche is, who they want to attract, what's different about them, it's really hard to convey that visually, either with the font, the color, the images as a starting point. And you can see how you can have a very good strategy and a very good visual artist. And if they're not briefed the same way, there's no way you're getting any kind of effective visual branding for your company.
Yeah. There, just as another example, Jen, there's a a prospective client that we were talking to a few years ago. We were really talking to them about, like, they came to us and they're like, I need a website built. I want SEO. I want Google Ads, right? The key things that a lot of people want. And they were an existing business in the trades, and they were a brand based on the person's name, meaning brand as in they had done no branding, but that's what they were using, the person's last name.
Yeah.
And so I had some really great discussions with them about how you need to create a strategy before you create your website. You need to understand your ideal clients, do some competitive analysis to understand where you want to position yourself in the marketplace in order to really stand out from the crowd. And they ended up moving forward with more of just what they wanted, right? They wanted creative direction. They hired a logo designer. The work is amazing.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with it. First of all, they changed their name. Again, the name was a little iffy because no research was done. They created a brand image that doesn't align with what they do. There's no kind of hooked to put your hat on so that people are like, oh yeah, that's what they do. So you're always doing, just because Ken brought it up, the story brand framework.
Yeah.
Donald Miller talks about how if you confuse, you lose. If you make people use up brain energy, those kilojoules, right, that we have in our brains, if they have to expend more energy than they should and that they know they should, they'll just leave, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's, what you were saying, and that other example that I shared, I think you're just, you got to put the hard work into it in order to make it, to actually give life to a brand that's going to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that will influence the creative designers. That will influence what colors they choose, what fonts they choose, how they, if it's an image or a word mark, is it soft looking? Is it impactful? Whatever. But it's all going to give the visual representation of what's going on with the strategy, who you are, who you represent, what kind of work you do, what kind of environment are you helping people in. So.
And just as a bit of background, like, I studied graphic design. I've built tons of logos. That's what I did for years, because I had a boutique graphic design agency, right? That's all I did every day in, day out. Built logos, did brochures, built websites back in the day, before I went into marketing. And I think one of the things that you see in some what they would call branding companies, and especially in designers, is that it's so easy to get caught up in a visual representation without first doing the really meaty work of understanding what Ken shared, your audience, what's going to make you different, what they're looking for, right? It's all about the audience. And yeah.
Do you have sort of like a war story from your time as a graphic designer? Was there a particular logo you were asked to design and you just had no context? Did that happen more often than not?
Yeah, those were the worst kind of projects or clients because what you learn in the industry is that if somebody comes with no expectations or no guidance, they do have expectations. Everybody has expectations, but if they come with no guidance on direction, fed by reality, they're just like,
That's called mind reading. Come
it's
on.
called mind reading, but you're not just mind reading them, although they're making the final decision. I think like there was several from my own experience, but I've observed it with other designers that I know now as well, where and it's true in any creative process, even creating a blog post, right? The garbage in, garbage out, lack of information in, who knows what you'll end up with. So yeah, I lots of interesting ones, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder too, I mean, one of the complaints I hear from some clients are like, oh, well, I'm not very like, visual. I'm not good at drawing. I'm not good. I could never direct a designer to do anything that I want. Some ways to go about that after you have your strategy done is also giving ideas or giving examples of what you don't like, because that can help steer the designer in the right way. I mean, if you're in financial services and you really can't stand the solid, reliable blue, okay, well then that gives the designer something to go on. That can be both yours and a bit more of a direction. So what you don't want, don't like, does not appeal to you is also important. With the caveat that it's not you who's going to be buying your own products or services. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's
it used to, along those lines, Jen, it used to make me laugh because when I had that boutique agency, the web was just exploding, and so they had gone very rapidly from really ugly text-based rotating logo type websites to highly graphical. I don't know if you remember that trend where it was like beautifully designed, very slow loading websites, and back in the day, we were all on dial-up, the horrible noise. And so it was all about how do you create a beautiful graphical website that's quick downloading. But it always used to make me laugh because I was far less strategic back then as far as the big picture of marketing, and most of my clients were smaller businesses, so they didn't have all that thought process or the experience of here's who our best clients are and here's what we should be doing for them. So it was much more aesthetic based, but I do remember part of my intake, because I had that part down really well, was what websites do you like? What websites don't you like? All of those kind of questions, right? What are your goals and blah, blah, blah. And I always remember every time a customer or client filled in that form or told me verbally like what websites they liked, it was like Apple, Nike, I don't know, like it was all the big brands where just me saying big brands, those were brands where they didn't even have to use their name because they had invested so smartly in creating a brand identity and figuring out what their customers liked, right? So, you can't get from point A to point B without doing that hard work.
Oh, very true. Very true. Okay, Ian, got another question for you here. Are there, so Ken went through and talked about some of the elements for branding as a small business owner, branding your small business. Are there some other elements that Ken didn't discuss that you would add?
Yeah, I think there's a lot because I'm super familiar with the Story Brand framework as well. And for our listeners, watchers, viewers, it is an amazing framework to build out kind of it's almost like a shortcut to brand identity on a web page. And that's really what it's designed for. Like if you go through the process, it's how to build a page. And so a lot of what's on there is not about understanding your competitive space. And, if you're a local plumber and all the plumbers are using pictures of a water droplet or, whatever it is, right? Like you have to know your competitive space. I think he didn't really talk too much about that. And I think that's really important. I think the visual identity that you ultimately create out of your, again, I think visual comes after you determine who this brand identity for the business is and all of the hard work that goes into that. But that doesn't just, a lot of people start with the logo, right? That's not the best place to start, and following the story brand framework is a quick way to kind of fill in a lot of those gaps. But what colors are you going to use? What kind of iconography are you going to use? Or is it just text-based? What on the visual side of things, like, are you going to use a certain tone of photos or a style of photos in your work? What's your website going to look like? How is your social media representation going to be? All of those things from a visual standpoint should be defined in your brand plan. But then also you should have brand guidelines, because chances are you're going to have to hire different people to do different things. And without brand guidelines, and this doesn't, like, I've seen brand guidelines back in the day. We used to create books in all the corporations we were in, right? Nobody had time to read because we hired really big agencies to create these brand guidelines, very lucrative business for them. And to substantiate it, they had to create this giant Bible of a book that, was very pleasing to the eye to flip through. But in actual fact, if you were a worker in marketing or branding or designing, whatever it was, you never looked at it because it was huge. So what we often find is that if you create like a 1-page or a 2-pager, that's, here's your colors, here's how to use the logo, here's the different uses of the logo, reverse use, full color, black and white, whatever. Super helpful for when you're handing it off to other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, because branding goes beyond the logo, your brand guidelines should also influence and guide how people talk about you in text-based things or in video, in social media, color usage, tone of voice. Is it playful? Is it professional? All that kind of stuff. And then, another big factor I think that should be considered too is what's the brand experience you're creating? So what's the experience? And this has multiple facets to it. Ideally, it's, what's the brand experience that somebody gets when they work with you, when they hire you, when they've purchased from you. But then there's other brand experiences people have. Is your sign in front of your office too bright for the public and they leave a bad review for you because they can't sit on their balcony of their apartment because your sign's too bright? This is a true story.
What is this?
What's that?
What is this? Which brand, or can you say?
So this is a dental office, and they have a digital sign out front. And when they were updating the sign, there was a social post review that basically said, "Hey, they're putting up a new sign. I sure hope this sign isn't as bright because we can't sit on our balcony." Right? So that's just a wacky brand experience. But those people connect a negative experience with that brand now. And it's, I don't know if there's an easy way to solve that problem. Give them some sunglasses or set up. I
don't know. Can you dim down the sign a bit?
I don't
know.
Yeah. But again, it's, the brand experience is really important because, I talked about Apple or Nike before. They've set a brand perception of quality. With Apple, it's quality, it's ease of use, it's hip, it's modern, right? Cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
And when you get that new Apple iPhone, you are either going to confirm or deny that brand message in your experience, and you'll share it with other people.
Yeah. And then bringing that into a small business. So if we take it from the visual into how is it like to experience your business? So as the small business owners, and small business goes, It's funny, depending on where our listeners are listening from. Small business in Canada is a vastly different size than small business in the US. For sure.
Statistically, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But anyway, so it goes right from how is it to interact with you, say the business owner or any of your executive team, versus how is it to interact with anyone who is either answering phones or actually executing the work that you've hired the company to do. So that's sometimes where a brand experience can fall down. We know this in the corporate world, the whole bait and switch where, the professional services team comes in, you get the executive, you get the owner, you get the project lead, but then the people that are actually doing the work, quite a bit junior and perhaps, oftentimes don't convey the same level of service as the first impression was. So that's another way that branding really matters for small business, is everyone down the line or everyone who's in touch with your customer or your clients, approaching them either the call or the email or the service that they need to do in the same kind of manner. If it's an energetic company, are they all, they hop into it within, 24 hours? If it's a very, very, I don't know what the other thing would be, very, kind and, just making sure everything's okay. Are they very, a nurturing company? So it's just that kind of way of interacting personally is still part of the brand experience that the client will go through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can I share two quick kind of anecdotal supports to what you just said, Jen?
Sure.
The first is we do almost universally when we're doing Google Ads or any kind of advertising for clients, we also, even in other circumstances, we use this for attribution, but we introduce call tracking and form tracking, and it's so that we can directly attribute, like, here's your return on investment from the ads, right?
Yeah.
Part of that is to make sure everything's working properly. We audit those calls every once in a while and just pop into a few of the recordings and listen in. And I'm always amazed, and I see this more with volume type providers, so carpet cleaners, not remodeling to the big extent, but just even in some of the ways that, especially or electricians or that kind of stuff, especially when they hire answering services.
Okay.
This is where I see a massive brand experience letdown.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, as I've listened through these, I'm like, okay, the person just asked the right questions, the customer service rep on the line, but they didn't ask the critical question of, like, where are you located, until 5 minutes into the call, and then they're like, oh, we don't serve you, and they just wasted 5 minutes of that person's time.
Yeah.
And then what was the other experience I was going to share?
Well, there's also not answering the phone, which has been a real problem.
Yeah.
The marketing's not working. Well,
yeah.
What's answering the calls?
Well, and you brought up the example of like in the corporate world, in service-based businesses, but I think it's equally true with small businesses, especially. And I'm just going to use marketing agencies as kind of the example,
okay.
Because I used to hire. You probably did too, Jen. Not sure if you did, Paul, but like, I used to hire marketing agencies, graphic design agencies, branding agencies, you name it, video production agencies. And the thing I hated most about that, even tech marketing agencies, like marketing automation and that kind of stuff, which is all much more accessible to small businesses now. So that's why I'm bringing this up. The thing I absolutely hated is what you said, was it is the massive bait and switch. You pull in the big guns, they sell you, the owner or a great salesperson, they sell you on, here's what we can produce for you. And then you end up working day to day with either junior people or super inexperienced people. And that relationship fizzles out so fast, and creates, first of all, lost opportunity, but then really bad feelings in the business if you're reporting to someone else, because it makes it look like you made a bad decision, when in fact it's just this horrible brand experience that
Yeah.
is the traditional marketing agency model. And I think a lot of us who have created our own agencies or do it because in a way that's like, I never want my agency to be like that, because that was an awful experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how to fix that comes through a lot of training. And
Yeah.
I think that's it's one thing that really, I mean, most of us in business know you got to be polite to the client. Yes, of course, but it really goes to like, how do we answer the phone? How do we handle problems? How do we deal with scope creep? And to be fair, that we were all juniors at once, so
Sure. Yep.
like having really clear guidelines on what to do, how to handle, how to support the folks as they're going through and handling the project, because most of them want to do the best possible thing for your company.
Yep.
But it's got to be crystal clear. And I think a lot of and that's the same thing. I mean, maybe this is for another topic too, but a lot of us that get into running our own business got into it because either, well, we saw a need, but we're good at, what it is that we're selling. We're not necessarily all that good at, replicating our thoughts and our ways of being into the personality that we want the company to convey. So it can be very, very challenging for sure. Yeah. But I mean, it's got to be done just at the basic. How do you want someone to feel on the phone? How do is it the kind of thing where we're always going to solve the problem? If you don't have the solution right away, we'll get back to you. Or just, I mean, maybe as I think about this, maybe this is a topic for a different podcast as well, because like really trying to walk the talk of a company. If someone is really invested in it, and then that goes to part of how do you build a good culture within your company that your customers and your clients can really feel and really come to stay with. So
yeah, I think it's a fundamental flaw. Like, I agree with you that we have to be gracious to junior people, right? Absolutely, and be respectful to them. But I think I think it's a flawed business model that that just naturally happened because of the reasons you talked about, where some people are really good salespeople or good technicians, but then they can't scale their business beyond themselves while providing excellent service and excellent results. And it just seems to be our industry, right, that we're in. I just find the savvy business owner is the one that's been burned far too many times. And then they come to you and they're asking the right questions. And the right questions are things like, well, who am I going to be working with? Who answers to me? How much experience do they have? They don't care if there's junior people doing work. They just need to know that there's a responsible person that's super qualified, that's going to provide the results they want. They're going to get great return on investment, right? And I think that's, we've kind of gone down a rabbit trail, but I felt like I had to close that off, because just ask the right questions is a great way to avoid bad experiences.
That's right. Are you my relationship manager? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Who is?
Who is?
and regardless of their title, because that's my other pet peeve, is they always called them like executive something, right? And I'd be like, well, how long have you been an executive? 3 weeks. Oh, that's great. You're my executive consultant or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, anyway. I know. Business has a funny thing with titles, don't they? That's for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, and that leads into another thing. Perhaps this is another podcast as well. But as you're growing your business and you're having people come in and perform that role, I guess understand too that some folks need to try that out. And what I mean by that is it could be very enticing to be customer facing all the time, or dealing with people. I like people, that kind of thing. But when you are, I guess, in certain situations, the face of the business and have to deal with, some of either the problems or the requests or the this or the that, it can be pretty draining for some of those junior people.
Yeah.
to do that. So I think that's it's another thing about how to get the right people in the right I guess the right positions in your company so that their best can really enhance the brand and the personality that you want the company to convey. So I mean, clearly this is more than just a logo. My goodness. So
Well, and to kind of make sure it's full circle with the brand perception idea, like when you do a bait and switch of any kind, right? We're talking about personnel bait and switches where you
yes,
create
yes,
expectations, a brand expectation that I'm going to have a highly qualified person performing the work and answering to me. And then suddenly they're faced with a junior person with a really high level title.
yeah,
Um, no, you're not fooling. You might fool somebody in the sales meeting. You're not fooling anybody past week 2 of the conversation. And I think that's where, from a brand perception standpoint, you just what you said. You need to be so careful about the experience that you're creating
yeah,
for people. Otherwise, you're going to be burning your future, right? You're burning your bridges to the future. So create good quality, fulfill what you said you would, keep your brand promises. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a delicate balance for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Paul, we haven't forgotten about you. I've got a great question for you here. Talk to me about some of the common myths about branding that you have heard. And
Yeah, I was just listening to the rabbit hole.
It was relevant, Paul.
But yeah, actually, goes back to something Ian said, and I agree with it. You can't separate the marketing from the branding. And I used the logo as an example of recognizability, but that is not the be all and end all of your brand. It's how many, if you look at a website, how many times have we talked to, if someone can't look at your website and within about 3 seconds know what you do, that's bad. And that's part of your brand and your color scheme. And Ian touched on a lot of this, but the color scheme, the continuity between the different pages of your website, I'm sure we've all seen, you go to a website and there's no continuity between color schemes and icons and things from one page to the next. It's like a disconnected experience, and that's all part of your brand. And one of the myths is like only companies that sell products or services have brands. This is an interesting one because Oprah Winfrey is her own brand. Okay, the Rolling Stones are their own brand. That might work for them, but that's not going to work for a small business, I don't think. If you're a small business and the owner is the brand, what happens when you want to sell that business or pass that business on?
sure.
Now you're into a rebranding issue, which has its own ramifications. But I think for a lot of small businesses, that can be an issue, is that the owner is the brand. And that might work in the beginning, but down the road, it can become a problem, especially as that business grows, or like I said, if it comes time to sell that business. One of the other things is that branding has no ROI. Well, you might not be able to directly attribute ROI to branding. That can be difficult, but if people recognize your brand, and going back to what I said earlier, if your brand has a really positive impression that people recognize that your brand does really good work, and that's one of the things that is recognized about you, well, that does have an ROI. You might not be able to put a dollar amount on it, but it definitely has an ROI. And branding doesn't have to be expensive. It's another myth, is that branding is expensive. Well, not if it's part of your marketing strategy. If you look at branding and marketing, back to what Ian said, as two integrated elements, then you can work the branding into your marketing, and it's not necessarily a separate thing. Ian might have some thoughts on that, but it doesn't have to be expensive.
Wonderful. Last question I want to hand over to Ken. Should you outsource your branding efforts? Why or why not?
The other question that Jen wanted me to address is, should you outsource the branding work for your small business? My answer is, I think in most cases, yes, because there are a lot of things that need to be done and looked at objectively. And if you're too deep into your own business, you're going to fall into a lot of traps. One of those traps is um, using the technical language of your business, not the language of your customers. So again, you're going to start to say, we do search engine optimization, we do tuck pointing, we do blah, 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 on and on and on, depending on what the nature of your business is. Well, that means a lot to you. It may not mean a lot to our ideal clients who are looking to have their problems solved. So when they land on your website and all they see is this technical jargonistic language, then that's not going to help them. And they're probably, look, attention spans are really short online. And so they're going to go look for somebody who helps address their problem in the easiest, clearest, maybe even in a lot of cases, fastest manner. And so you definitely need to get away from that, falling into that trap. The other trap is, like I said, a lot of businesses talk about themselves as the hero of the story. And yeah, it's important to have, a backstory about why you do what you do, why you're passionate about it, how you got to the point where you were able to become this guide because you overcame some of these objectives. You've been there, done that. That's all really important, and that's all part of the story, but it's not the main story. Your main focus needs to be on solving the problems for your clients and talking about that and how you do that. So that's another really common trap that I think a lot of businesses fall into. And then, I think another thing that we do frequently is we interview clients or we interview customers of our clients. And when we do that and we're acting as a third party, we get different responses than somebody in the business might get, because they don't want to offend anybody inadvertently. They may actually be kind of shy about talking about why, some of the great things of why they decided to do business with you, why that comes across. But when they talk to a third party who captures that information and distills it, and we go through a process to really kind of elucidate, or extract that information out during the interview process, so that we really do get those differentiators. And I think that that's a really powerful, beneficial thing. And then the other thing is, we have fantastic sets of tools, businesses like ours that can do competitor analysis, that can see, where there are threats, opportunities, strengths, and weaknesses as you compare to other businesses in your industry or niche. And so from that perspective, I think there's tremendous value in hiring somebody and outsourcing the branding work. The last thing I'll say is, if you try to do this yourself, you certainly can take a shot at it. But I think the biggest thing is, working with a company that you outsource with that has the full breadth of understanding of what a brand is and how to accomplish that, and how to translate that into every piece of marketing material that you have, so that because branding is ultimately all about consistency and clarity. And so, every communication that you do really should be consistent with what you want your brand to be known for. And so if you start, going off on tangents, you might get a lot of personal satisfaction from that. You might get some people who are really excited about that, but you may also wind up alienating a lot of your best potential ideal customers. So I think really working, with a company in outsourcing your branding work is really critical.
Fantastic. We have covered a lot about branding today. And we're almost at the top of the hour here. So I want to throw this out to Paul and Ian. Any last thoughts on this topic of branding at all? Any last encouragements for small business owners to take this as a very serious endeavor?
I think you're muted, Ian.
Oh yeah, Ian, I think you're muted.
That was on purpose, Paul. No, Paul, do you have anything to add? Because I could talk about branding all day, so I have to be careful.
Just recognize that it's important, even if you're a small business. It is important. I think that's the biggest thing, because a lot of small businesses don't realize that branding and being recognized and having people know what you do is important. They get wrapped up on themselves, like Ken just said, is that they'll use a lot of technical jargon that doesn't mean anything to the average person. So just recognize that it's important, even for a small business.
Good.
Yeah. Just a couple thoughts. And this goes along with what Ken was answering about outsourcing your branding efforts. The key questions I would ask a business owner who's considering doing this themselves, or having their cousins, nephews, friend do it, and I say that jokingly, but I've seen it, I think we all have, is what is the value to your business? What value to your business is your brand, right? What can it add to your business? How much is it worth to you to get this right? And what's the cost if you get this wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So put the effort into it. The other thought I wanted to share too, and I think it's kind of woven through here, and it's probably because of our unique perspective that we each bring to this as marketing consultants, is that when looking for the right type of people to help you, look for strategic marketers that understand branding. They might not even do the actual, so they might do a portion of this, the setting up of the work that guides the brand development. But then when it comes to the visual, they might do that internally. They might hire a designer. But if you have the guidance of that strategic marketing plan, you will get this right the first time, which will be enormously profitable and powerful to your business. So, choose wisely. But get a good brand going.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think this is a great place to wrap up. Thank you for joining us today. Please like and share our podcast and subscribe to it and help us get the word out. Tell a fellow business owner about the show. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.